Well, Sairam Jack, and welcome to the program. This is indeed a treat for us, as you are someone really quite special. You've had a lifetime full of Sai experiences, and they're not just, something that one might think of. Simply, they're really quite illuminating, and I think will be very valuable for all devotees who are getting a chance to listen to your experiences as well as learn from them. So we really are excited to have you with us. We'd like to start, if we can, Jack, with your early years, and have you share with us how you first came to Baba.
Oh, yes. Excuse me, quite a while ago. Uh, my first start with, the first I'd heard of Swami was from a friend of mine in those days, and he worked for me, a guy named Bob Daniele. And I had lost touch with him. We were in the same aerospace company here in Los Angeles. I lost touch with him over the years, but then suddenly I get a postcard from India, and it was written, I think, with a pencil, a regular, just a penny postcard, we used to call them. And he said, he started it with, "Dear Jack, this is your lucky day, Hawley." He said, "I'm sitting on the veranda." No, he said, use the word porch. "I'm sitting on the porch of Sai Baba, who is God. And I'm spending as much time with him as I can. And you should get a book about him that was just written and it just came out. And the book was by Dr. Sam Sandweiss, and you can buy it in the Hollywood Center." Well, we live down on the beach, so I immediately jumped into my car and drove up to the Hollywood Center, very nice, to the address that he gave. A very nice lady answered the door. She said, "Oh, yes, I've got the book." So I bought the book from her, brought it home. And as I walked in the door, this was maybe 45 minutes later or an hour later, as I walked in the door, my wife I held the book up, and my wife looked at it. She said, "Oh my God." I said, "What?" She said, "Well, that's the man that I had a dream about 2 weeks ago." And she said, "It was such a powerful dream. I didn't know who it was or what he was or what. So I didn't bother telling you." She didn't know quite what was going on. So that was our beginning. And then when sometime later we started going to meetings, but in Orange County. We were when we'd always time our trips. So if we were on our way to San Diego, for example, we'd stop by, make sure that we could stop by and spend a couple hours singing bhajans or whatever at the Orange County, one of the centers in Orange County. Or they had a monthly thing that we'd go and listen to other people talk about him, and it was really very nice for us. So that was the beginning. Uh, we did that maybe for 3 or 4 years. See, we had children still in school and so forth. So we didn't feel ready to go to India yet. And then maybe 2 years later, in 1978, I talked with her, and she was really very helpful on it about going to India. So we couldn't, because she was still home with the kids and doing that thing, but I could. So by that time too, my consulting business was going well enough. So there's a skeptic in me. And being from Los Angeles, by the way, every fifth person you see on the street has all the answers, and they're a guru of some kind. So there was some skepticism still in me. So so I thought that if I were to call Japan and call Hong Kong and some of my various clients, I could pay for the trip. And yet, if the trip was totally a washout because a phony, then I wouldn't feel that bad about it, is what it was. So I did that. So I lined up a trip that went like this: from LA to Hawaii, and then into Japan, and then to Hong Kong, then into Thailand, and then into Nepal, and then into India, and then from there around the rest of the world, into Iran. In those days, we could go into Iran, and then Italy, oh no, Iran, Israel, then Italy, and then up to England. And one of the ways I could sell that trip was to have her, promise to her to have meet me in England, and we could spend our own time. So that was the first trip to Swami, and that was by Skeptical Jack. So I did that trip, and when I finally got, by the way, it was maybe 3 weeks later, because my main aim was to go to Swami, was to go to India and check this stuff out. So I arrived in India, and by that time I'd been on the road for 3 weeks, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. So by that time I had the traveler's illness. I was feeling very uncomfortable. Had a room in Bangalore, and luckily Swami was in Whitefield. I didn't know Whitefield from whatever, so I left that morning feeling very bad in the taxi. But this was the reason for going. So why, I didn't want to spend another 3 days of uncomfortable illness, traveler's illness, waiting to see him. I wanted to see him as soon as I could. So that very next day, I got in a taxi, and I felt so bad that 2 or 3 times on the way out to the ashram from Bangalore, my hotel, I actually reached up ready to tap the taxi driver on the shoulder and say, "Turn around, take me back. I've got to spend 3 days in bed." But I didn't. So when I got there, I walked over to this place. I stepped through a little door that's in a big gate. And as soon as I stepped through that, I felt good. I felt, oh, this is good. My illness is not going to knock me down. So I went in, I sat down at a distance to watch all the things going on. He came out for darshan, which I didn't know what it was, but he came out for that. And I watched the monkeys on the walls walking around and so forth, watched the people especially. And my consulting is really sort of people watching anyway. So I was really having a nice time. And come 5 o'clock or so that day, the afternoon darshan was done. So I left. I went out through that same little door. And when I got in a taxi to go back to the hotel, I felt terrible. I thought, oh my gosh, this illness has come back so quickly. So I got back to the hotel, had really a rough night, not feeling good at all, not knowing whether I'd make it the next day. The next day, I went out in the morning. I didn't want to miss it. So I got in the taxi, hoping that I could get there. I got there okay, still feeling bad. But then I stepped through that little door in the gate, and I felt better again. And it started coming to me, oh, wait a minute, maybe there's something special here. Then I spent the next two weeks, roughly 2 weeks there. And I got more, oh, by the way, at that time, that afternoon, after the second good day, my illness was gone. So Swami somehow had taken care of it. Now, I wasn't sure, but I watched it and I loved it. And I knew that something very special was happening. So my whole trip around the world that the Skeptical Jack was concerned about turned out to be a wonderful trip. I ended up going into with some work into Iran in those days, and then on through all those other countries and meeting my wife. We had a wonderful time in a nice little place down on the English Channel.
It's amazing. And did you have an interview on that first trip?
Oh no, no.
That came later. So after that trip, you then sort of entered into a period of time which you call the years of living with and for Swami, and there were 26 years of going to see him consecutively and living long periods of time with him.
Yes. Well, all right. There was that first trip. Let me tell you the ending of the trip first, because it was sort of a fun ending, and it sort of anchors some things. We were there. We did have a little interview with Swami, but it was quick, and we were part of a group. But as we left out, he said, "You're not going to stay for birthday," and we wondered about that. We felt sort of bad about that, but we didn't know whether that was a direction to stay or not. we had plans to do a little sightseeing in India. Neither of us had ever been really to India to see, other than my earlier trip. So we went up to Gulmarg on our way home. And in Gulmarg, there's no snow, by the way, at that time. But Gulmarg was very pleasant and so forth. And my wife is a horsewoman. She loves to ride horses. So we rented a couple of horses. I can get by on a horse, but I'm not really a horse pro at all. So, and that's right, I'm sorry, before we left, I was hoping against hope for another good, strong interview with Swami. And I would argue with him. I'd say, "Oh, Swami, I would imagine what he thinks of me." And I'd say, "Oh, no, you're making a mistake on that." And it got to a point where I was so frustrated with Swami not paying attention to me that I hoped he would do, and that I had heard about so many times in Orange County, different people. So I was so angry at him. I called him Mr. Raju rather than Swami or Bhagawan or whatever. Mr. Raju, you're making a mistake about that, I would say in my mind, my crazy mind. So there we are up on those horses in Gulmarg. And my horse was a skinny little horse, and Louise laughed at it. But every once in a while, he would stop and he would put his leg, because he could feel the weight and how my weight was on his shoulders. And he knew exactly what to do with me. So he'd put his legs out and he'd sprawl his front legs out further and further and further till there was nothing more for me to hold on to. So I'd fall off the front of the horse. I didn't get hurt. I just had to climb back on it, embarrassed, and go on further. And he did that 3 times. So by the time we got back to the stable, I was frustrated with that horse, and I said to the stable fellow, I said, "What's that horse's name?" He said, "Oh," he said, "that's Mr. Raju." So I know. So thank you, Swami. Okay, I understand. We should have stayed and so forth. So anyway, we went on our way. But during those years, though, things changed tremendously, tremendously. One of the first interviews we had was, one of the first interviews on that trip before the Mr. Roger thing toward the end. But the first thing was we went in for an interview. Sorry, this was after Raju's second trip. Went in for an interview, and Swami looked at me. Everybody was sitting down. There's maybe 8 or 10 people in the little interview room sitting around his feet. And he looked at, and I was sitting next to his feet. He slapped me across the face pretty hard, whap. And everybody looked, and they were scared. And Louise was jolted, and everybody was wondering what was happening. And then Swami said, "I love you." And by the way, I wasn't shocked at all. I was giggling when Swami slapped me. Oh, that was so nice. So Swami whacked me and said, "I love you," and that has stuck with me, as you can tell. And every time I think of that, we have to smile and giggle a little bit. Then there's another, I think, thing that's worth telling about is our traveling years. By the way, I was also teaching at the school at that time, and at the university, really, with the MBA boys, and conducting various meetings there. So it was sort of nice for us. And I remember Dr. Reddy's father, Narendra Reddy's father, was there at the time, and he asked me, he said, "Why don't you lecture on, to the foreigners?" And I said, "No." I said, I'm still a student here. I'd rather be a student and learn rather than tell." And I said, "When I get there, I'll be sure to let you know," because it was nice. It would have been nice, but no, it was nicer not to. So anyway, our neighbor then was Veronica. And we were on our way, following Swami, on our way up to Kodai Canal. and we were in a taxi, and we were running into some very tough traffic. So she, we had very hard traffic and going along pretty fast. And she was sitting, of course, in the passenger side, which is on the left in their cars. And the mirror was knocked off that side of the taxi. And both Louise and I were shocked. Veronica turned around. She's, by the way, from Ojai. You'll know her. You would have known her. But Veronica immediately said this. She said, never look back. That's teaching me not to worry about anything in my past. That just throw it away. So it was really nice to hear her. And then the next time we were on our way somewhere, oh no, we were going to go somewhere. And she says, where are you going? I said, we don't know. And she says, oh, and in her Hungarian American accent, she says, oh, Swami puts. I said, yes, that's exactly right. And that's true. That became a guideline, a strong universal law that we followed since then. Swami puts. So wherever we found ourselves ending up would be Swami puts. And what happened is my own business turned. I just changed it. Thank God I was the president of the company, so I could do pretty much what I wanted. But I kept enough consulting business around the world, but I also was really there mostly for Swami. So we would travel and do workshops or do seminars for Sathya Sai Baba in various places around the world. And we'd mix that with some work. By that time, by the way, this was 4 years later, the children had all left. So they were all out of the nest. So Louise was a lot freer to go along with me to the various places. And that kept on for the next like 20 years. We were doing that, going places. We would, for example, go to Japan. I would do a little work, but then we'd also, while there, do some work with the Japanese organizations, the Sai organization. And that's the way our life went for those 20 years. It was wonderful. We never knew where we were going to go. And we did a lot of traveling. And we didn't worry about it because we really did know by this time Swami puts. Example would be one time we ended up, and we just come out of the mountainous western part of South America through, and then we ended up in Rio de Janeiro. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. The plane landed there at the airport, and the airport there wasn't open. It was just partly open, and there was hardly anybody there. It was mostly dark, and we were both hungry and tired, and wanting to find a place to eat. There's no place open in that whole airport. So as we walked by this one little feeding area, it was a very pleasant restaurant, but the door was open, but the red rope was across the door, so nobody could get in it. So, and I looked inside, and the night crew, when they left last night, they hadn't cleaned up all the tables. So I looked at Louise, I unhooked the red rope. I said, please enter, madam. So we went in and we sat down at one of the tables where there was bread left over. So we sat down, we ate bread in that very fancy restaurant at the Rio de Janeiro airport. And that's the kind of thing that happened a lot to us. Another time this is all for Swami, by the way. These trips are all Swami. We ended up, we had a long, I don't know why, trip. It took us 52 hours to get to the interim places and then into Australia. And when we arrived there, it was a little bit late. So there were like 300 people waiting in the audience. We were at the whole very, very nice little school that the Sai people were using, but that was Rupert Murdoch's school when he was a boy. So we were there at Rupert Murdoch's school, and we were dog tired. So we didn't have any time to find out what they wanted or who. All we did is just start talking because everybody's sitting there and they had been waiting for 20 minutes or half an hour or so. So we did our talk and so forth. But then we had to wait around because other things were happening. So we went out in the hall and we walked down the hall, and the library door was recessed. So that gave a sort of a dark spot there. So we both went to sleep there on the floor after 52 hours, this was, by the way, sleep on the floor. And then they came by and they picked us up. They said, oh, you know what we did? Is we canvassed the neighborhood here, and with a nice lady down the street has a bedroom for you. So we went into that bedroom and had a nice nap that afternoon. But that's the kind of Swami driven adventure we lived for 20 years. And it was a wonderful time for us, wonderful time. And my whole business took a turn. The turn was toward, of course, toward spirituality. And then I started to write the first book. And the first book was Dharmic Management book. And Swami loved me doing it. And he said, what's the name of the book? I said, Dharmic Management, Swami. Oh, yes, yes, yes. So then a German group came in, for example, and Swami brought us in with them, and he was talking to them, and then he said, oh, this man is writing a book, management book. He said, what's the name of the book? I said, Dharmic Management, Swami. Oh, yes, yes, Dharmic Management. They were all very interested and so forth. So that was those years. And oh yeah, and by the way, well, let me take a look at this. Oh. Swami told me when I was writing that book, he said, I am within you, and whatever you hear or whatever you write will be me saying it. So that was fabulous. Nice. We were, by the way, we didn't have a room at that time. We had to move around various places, and I'd plug in here and plug in there. And by the way, in those days, there was no such thing as a laptop computer. So I had to go back to the States and get a big lugging around laptop. You know, those that the early one was. Anyway, I forget, the very first one was well known for years. But so on my way back to the States, I thought, I told Louise, I'm going to be back. It'll take me probably a couple of weeks. You know me, I'm very careful about what I buy, and I'll have to research it and so forth. And so I won't be back for 2-3 weeks. So she said, okay. She was there happily with Swami and Prasanthi Nilayam. So I got back to the States, and the first night I got there, I got a call from my friend, Tony. He said, oh, Jackie, I've been researching laptop computers nowadays. And he said, this is the best one. This is the best buy for you. So I went out the next day. I bought it. By the way, for a laptop in those days was like $2,000, I think. So I went out and bought that the next day, jumped on the airplane, and I was back to India within 5 or 6 days. And that's the kind of things that happen all the way through. Swami putting words in my mouth, Swami doing this, Swami doing that. Let me see some of them that would be nice to share with you. Oh yeah, about that he said, yeah, after he said your inner voice is me, is the way he put it. Afterward, maybe 6 or 10 years afterwards. Yeah, because that first book came out in, I think, 1991 or 90, something like that. And it was it immediately became a bestseller. Now that's sort of odd, because it was a book about spirituality and management. And it really was Reawakening the Spirit and Work, the Power of Dharmic Management. So, and you'd see people, professors at various meetings, they'd look at that, it would be so interesting at that. So they'd buy it, but they wouldn't let other people know they're buying it. They'd put it in their bag and then they bring it up and pay for it. So it was the first time ever, to my knowledge anyway, that a management book had a spirit in the title. And by the way, it was really fun for me to do that. And it was nice for me to do that. And it integrated into my consulting work all of the wonderful, basic human values that Swami talks about so much. So then the second book came by. The second book was the Bhagavad Gita walkthrough. You probably are familiar with that one. And that, and I was worried. After a while, Swami, I started getting thoughts or words in my mind or his voice saying, do the Gita. And I couldn't. I said, no, Swami, I'm not a Gita bred fellow. I couldn't do the Gita. I'm not Indian. I'm Western. I don't really know the story, blah, 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 blah. I had a lot of little arguments. And I kept coming, do the Gita, do the Gita. I said, Swami, well, finally, of course, I lost the argument. And he had better arguments. And he said, just do the Gita. So I started working on that. And I noticed that people would come down the street, people that I didn't even know, and they'd hand me a book. Say, oh, this is very nice, interesting Gita that you should see about so-and-so. And it ended up where, well, between researching and then buying them and so forth, I had to read roughly 40 different versions of the Gita, long versions, a lot of them. And you know how the Indian versions are. And the way the Gita is written there by many of the people who translated it into English from the Sanskrit or from Hindi, whatever. They'd say a line that Krishna would say, and then they would have a explanation of that over the next 5 pages. Then there would be another couple of lines, and they'd explain that and so forth. Well, I realized that Swami was getting me, and by the way, and I ended up reading about 40,000 pages. And I got to a point where I really understood the story. A little bit before that, this is the kind of help that Swami gave. A little bit before that, he was again in Whitefield, and I was across the street, and I was doing my research for that book. I was looking in a Gita in a bookshop, upstairs bookshop across the street from the main gate at Whitefield. And I found a book by a very well-known professor in India. And I was looking, by the way, for a through line. What would be the main gist of the Gita that would help me tie it up? And his through line, or his main idea, was that the Gita is a balance between action and serenity or something. So I thought that makes sense. Oh, and I really appreciated him. I liked him. I liked some of his writings. So I then I heard this right after, as I was reading this book, standing there reading it, I heard the music starting over where Swami was. So I put the book down, went over across there, and I sat down with the students. And Swami came out, walked right over to the students, and there I was, like sort of in the front row of it. And he looked at the students, and he said, some people, even good scholars, think that the Gita is a balance between activity and quietness. That's not true. He said, even good scholars think that. It's not true. Then he went on to talk with the students about whatever he was there to talk to them about. But then he put that first line in there for me. Swami knew that I was across the street. He knew that I was looking for a main thread in the Bhagavad Gita that I could work around. And then he called me right back, and he told me, don't use that one. So that was it. So Swami, again, oh yeah, then he called me in for an interview with Louise and I, and he said, it's not your inner voice as me this time. He said, you have everything in you that you need to write this book. He said, and if you don't, then I will take care of it. So I was delighted. But you know, this is something so foreign to me at first, but it was wonderful, and I felt so good about him uh, asking me to do it. Well, another time, this is very important. This is the beginning of something even bigger that changed with us. I was on the veranda, I sat on the veranda, and behind me sat Venkatesh. And he's a saint. He and I are great friends, and he's a wonderful fellow to have sitting there. And it was about halfway back in the veranda. And this is what I meant when I said that I was sitting about 21 feet from Swami's doors for 21 years. And I'd watch everything, I'd learn everything, I just loved it there. But Swami came out, and he walked over to me, and I was sort of, I think I was holding up part of the, I'm not sure, it was many years ago, I was holding up part of the book, and he looked at me, and he didn't look at those, he just looked me in the eye. Very serious face, very intense look, and I returned it. By that time, I'd been around there for so many years, I loved it, and I knew something was happening. But he was looking at me, and it was for like a full, solid, powerful 8 seconds. Now, 8 seconds of Swami's look, as you well know by now, is a dramatic kind of a thing. Well, Venkatesh, sitting behind me, experiencing that Swami's look into my eyes, it was so powerful for him that he, after Swami went back inside of his door, he went home. He told me the next day, he said, I went home and I meditated on that, Jack. He said, something very big is happening. I don't know what it is. He said, but it's almost as if Swami is he's giving you an initiation, is the term they use over there a lot. He's giving you initiation, or something big is happening there. So I knew too, by the way, I knew the same thing. And when he looked into my eyes, I looked back into his. There was no fear, nothing. It was just a wonderful, wonderful time with Swami. And it was a turning point in our whole life. We knew it then, and we know it now. There's a, okay, okay. So anyway, that book came out, the Bhagavad Gita walkthrough. It was finally called a walkthrough for Westerners. Swami looked at when it was ready to come out, I brought it to him for him to bless it, and he was just very, very happy. He said, Bhagavad Gita. I said, yes, Swami. Yes, good. For Westerners? I just sat there, didn't know quite what to say. And he said, yes. There's something. He indicated fine. And what he does, by the way, probably is know who's going to be publishing it. He didn't have a publisher at the time, but he knew who was going to be publishing it, and he knew what they would prefer to call it. And it was going to be a publisher in the States and so forth. And he knew exactly how to handle that. And I knew he knew. So, and he knew that I knew that he knew. So those are those years.
So yes, Jack, as we begin to just wrap up, I was wondering if you could share with us some of your experiences that led you to the point where you began to sort of move from the form to the formless in your spiritual outlook.
Yes. Yeah, let me, something happened in, I think it was 98. My wife got ill, and that was about the time that I was doing that book too. But she got very ill, and what it was is a stroke, come to think of it. it's not illness, it was a stroke. And we were sitting, having our little lunch in our little flat. By then we had a flat up on the 4th floor in the S3 building. It was wonderful. It was like living in the trees. It was quiet up there. It was really very pleasant. Again, that was across from Veronica. And I didn't know quite what to do. So finally and I wrote about this in the book, by the way, because it had such a big impact on me, that living by the Gita and having been so involved and engaged for years, those years in the Bhagavad Gita, and living in a place like Swami's place where the Gita, the values and the methods of the Gita are still very much alive in this world, was just totally mind-blowing. I was worried about her, very much so. So right down the hall from me was a doctor, a cardiologist at the new hospital. By that time, the new hospital was going strong. So he, of course, we brought her to the hospital, and she was in the hospital and so forth. But something happened to me. One time when I was sitting in the hospital, this was the first day or so, she came out of that unconsciousness that she would drift in and out of. She came out of that, and I said to her, Louise, I said, we got to see this as a blessing. We've got to see there's some gift in this for us. She said, yes, right away. That was a turning point, because that was a sort of a mind shift for me. I went back to our nice little place up on the 4th floor, 3rd floor in India, 4th floor here. And I felt better. I knew that no matter what happened, and we didn't know whether she was going to live or die. We didn't know whether she was going to be able to walk or what. And we had all those questions. And I had questions inside of me about whether I'd be able to handle it. I didn't know how I would. But suddenly, something came over my mind. And it was just something that it was very easygoing. I had a tremendous confidence that things would work out the way they're supposed to. No matter how they worked out, it would be the way they were supposed to. And we would accept whatever it was. So I went back over to the hospital, and I told her about that. And by the way, I called this the Prasad zone. And if you look at Prasad, Prasad is, by definition, it's a gift from divinity, from the divine, from God. It's a gift, or it's His grace. They use Prasad as a way of saying that His grace was that you got this, so forth. And then that was right, and I knew that that's exactly that's the wheelhouse, if you were. That's where the direction for this whole sub-adventure was coming from. I also found out a few years later, or several months later anyway, that prasad also means a quietness, or a feeling of, how did I put it? Oh, good, yeah. Sort of a general, that's it, good, a certainty, a general mood of certainty and divine favor. And also to become within yourself totally clear and calm, clear and calm. So all those things happen. I wrote about them later because it stuck with us. Oh yeah, anyway, I went back to the hospital and I talked to Louise, and she immediately said, yes, she'd like that. And not only that, the nice part of it is she was in the same mood. It wasn't me bringing the word to her. She was exactly in the same mood that I was in. This mood of calmness, the mood of understanding, the mood of acceptance, and so forth.
Yeah. So you've sort of given people often that assignment that we should work on our life's assignment of achieving self-realization as well.
Okay. Well, by the way, how are we doing time-wise?
We've got about 4 more minutes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Good. Gee, it seems a lot longer than that. That prasad zone, I call it, stuck with us. I mentioned in the book, for those who've read it, it's in the back of the book. And the reason I use that story, by the way, is to let people know that if they live the Gita and if they breathe the Gita, then there will be certain ways of living and learning and taking care of themselves that they never realized would happen. And then we came back. Oh yeah, then Swami was getting more and more ill, and he was. We realized that something had switched. Swami, his way of dealing with us had changed, and we changed with it. And there's a lot of things that I could talk about. There's maybe a couple of hours worth of things, but they just changed. And we were perfectly happy with him, and he was perfectly happy with us. We didn't get many interviews at all. We knew that he was doing certain things, and I was working on a couple of other books, frankly. One of them was The Essential Wisdom of the Gita, and another one was Roadmaps to Self-Realization. And that's a book totally drawn from the Bhagavad Gita. And it's all of the things that people can do and should look at them and assess themselves, assess their own path and how they're doing on that path, and see what areas of their spiritual path they might have to put a focus on so they can get rid of this or improve that or whatever. So it's a really very practical, down-to-earth way of approaching it. Frankly, it's drawn from 1,000-year-old things that the rishis in India did. They call it Atma Vichara, self inquiry. So there's now a part of that Bhagavad Gita, not a part, the whole Bhagavad Gita turned out to be, after I got into the working on it, turned out to be 65 pages of, I hate to call them that, but worksheets that people can look at and assess their own path and how they're doing along the path and where they can get better and so forth. And that book is a free book now, and it exists in a form for the internet, or so people can look it up on their phone device. And it's 65 different worksheets based on chapter by chapter by chapter in the Gita of how they might improve their own spiritual development and their growth and their involvement. And that's the same thing that's happened with us, by the way. So writing the Gita, Louise's illness, and then on the on the 10th, on the 2010, the year 2010, we were getting ready to go on another trip. By that time, Louise was really much better. We were ready to go on a big trip to Kazakhstan and 5 other countries or something. And she looked at me. Getting ready, by the way, really meant a lot of things. Like getting people to translate this and to put this into their language and so forth. So it was a lot of work. And she looked at me with a sad look on her face and said, "Jackson, I can't do this anymore." And I was pleased. In 2010, this is Swami, don't forget, Swami passed from his body the next year. So I said, that's good, fine, because we know that our time with Swami, it was almost as if we had graduated. It was so nice. It was so nice to be there. It was so nice. And even saying that we're not going back this year and not going to do that thing in the Middle East was perfectly okay. And we knew that it was perfectly okay with him. It's just, we knew. I mean, that certainty that I talked about is one of the main things about the prasad zone. We just know, and he knows. So that was our, and then, by the way, when Swami did finally go into Mahasamadhi, we, people would call me and say, oh, I've been crying for days. How do you feel? I said, you really want to know how I feel? I said, yes. I said, I feel gratitude. That's all I can feel when I think of Swami. I can't think of his leaving this, and I'll miss him, but I can't think, it's just gratitude for all that we've gotten and all that he has given us over all of these years. Higher vibrations now, and he was very excited to tell it to both Louise and I. Higher vibrations now. That ties in with that and several other things. But anyway, what it amounted to is this. I developed, being a writer, I developed a way of looking at it as if he were the orange door. And what he's saying is go beyond that. So that Sathya Sai Baba, who is running everything, is so important. That's the Saguna. That's the God in a form aspect of him. That means that we can move beyond that. What a wonderful thing it was for us. So we started looking at him as the orange door, and a wonderfully welcoming orange door, but we could go beyond that. And that's sort of what happened to us. And that brought back another whole flash of that prasad zone idea. So we have in our lives had two major prasad zone things, and we've been living in it. So when we stopped going to India in 2010, we didn't stop anything with Swami. Swami was with us every minute. That's what I said. We're grateful. Well, we're living here grateful, and now we're in this period. Thank you. We're in this period of oh, good. That's a nice poem. Of sort of staying home and having to stay home and so forth. Everybody's concerned about it, but we're lavishing in it. It's just wonderful for us to be here and have this quiet time. And for example, think of all these stories of ours and all of our years with Swami. And it's a sort of a regeneration of the prasad zone here in our lives. And that prasad zone really, if you look at it, is moving to the formless Sai, moving into the nirguna. And nirguna it's becoming one with him. And that's where we are, and that's why we're so happy now, no matter what happens in this world of ours. We're just there, and we're beyond the door.